All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Mary. I'm one of the librarians here at the Downers Grove Public Library. I am in charge of adult programming, but it's very nice to join you guys and get to know all of you and to introduce our great presenter. Tonight, we welcome Heidi King from College Inside Track, who speaks nationwide on the college process and works closely with our community members to provide education and guidance with the exciting but sometimes stressful milestone family event of heading off to college, which is very exciting. Heidi has contributed to articles in Yahoo Finance and was a featured speaker at Morningstar World HQ as a subject matter expert. Tonight, we'll discuss the challenges families face and what is now the second most expensive purchase a family will make other than their home, which is purchasing a college education. Heidi is uniquely qualified to speak today as she recently went through the college process with her two sons, who are both in college now. Very exciting. And we are excited to have her join us.
Thank you, Mary. I really appreciate the opportunity to educate on something that, yes, is pretty near and dear to my heart, as I do have those two boys in school right now. So I'm also a nearby neighbor. As we mentioned, I went to Lyons Township. My kids went to Glenbard West, and we live in the area. So I know how hard your kids are working towards the goal of post-secondary education. And tonight we're really going to talk about some of the major changes that I see in my world, which is kind of late stage college planning, those high school time frame and the year. And I'll explain what has changed, and then review some financial assistance opportunities that can help you pay for school and just really do a better job and strategic planning. And we are going to be on Zoom, and I know we are familiar with Zoom, but I'm going to have an opportunity to have you guys use that chat feature. Part of the chat feature will be opening up that chat bubble. If you have any questions, I will stop several times. But if you have anything that's specific to a slide or you want me to go back, feel free. Happy to do it. We have a lovely group today, and definitely utilize that chat so I can make it a little bit more specific for your needs. So dive right in. I do work as an education and partnership team member at College Inside Track. College Inside Track has been helping families through college process for over 17 years. Our goal when we work with families is to always find right fit schools. So what you're looking for is right academic fit, right social fit, but those schools must also be the right financial fit for the family. If you have a high school student right now, I know this is stressful. So our goal when we work with families is to really reduce that stress. And tonight we're doing that with an educational webinar through Community Ed and the Downers Grove Library. So thank you very much for hosting us. We're going to talk about how some of the things have changed so much since many of us went to school. Our first opportunity to do a little bit of Q&A is to really talk about some of the things that have changed. And I would say one of the biggest is the tuition costs. So as a percentage, how much do you think tuition has increased nationwide since 1990, about 20 years, right? Go ahead, use that chat feature, and then Mary is going to let me know what your guesses are. Go ahead and put that into the chat. Just a guess. What do you think it is? This is at public institutions. So like a state flagship school, this is not considering the community colleges, but really a flagship state school. What do you guys think?
We have a guess for about 300%. we have a guess on 4 times what it was when they went, so they're thinking around, 400%.
Yeah. Now, do you see the quiz up there where you can see the 213?
We do.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Just
Yes.
want to make sure that you can also see the numbers. Yeah. So you guys are even higher than the numbers that I'm giving you, truly. So we're all aware of how expensive school has become. The statistics show that at public institutions, it's 213%. Even higher are private schools. Now, let's compare some schools in our area. University of Illinois, when I sit down with families in our area, which I do all the time, and talk about college, the schools that your kids are reporting that they want to go to, often University of Illinois, up over 500%. University of Wisconsin, this is a big surprise to many. Their tuition is up over 1,000%, right? Triple digits. Largest that we see nationwide is UConn, up over 1,300%. So this is why it is so important when you're building that list of schools that you consider the right academic, right social, and right financial fit. Because when you are considering the total cost of attendance, it is really important to find schools um, with some current knowledge and strategy and sometimes support. Why? Because this is what it costs for many schools in our area. I said I get to meet with kids every week, love my job and talking to high schoolers and their parents about current college process. And often they'll have some of those upper level schools, tier one, tier two, Ivy League type schools, right? Those tuition prices are not for 4 years, but that is 1 year at Columbia, Northwestern, and NYU. I haven't met a kid yet that doesn't want to go to the beach, someplace warmer, or the mountains. So often kids will say that they want to go to UC Boulder or a school like UCLA. Um, just so you know, UCLA is had the most amount of applicants out of any school nationwide. At about 148,000 people applied to UCLA last year alone. So depending on where you go, some of the opportunities for merit scholarship become fewer and fewer because they have so many people applying. That would be the case with some of those competitive flagship schools like UCLA and UC Boulder. Now, I have University of Denver on there. Why? Looks more expensive. But here's the deal. It is a private school, very similar, about 30 minutes away from UC Boulder. They have an eyeball popping cost of admissions. But guess what? On average, kids get well over a $30,000 per year scholarship on average at that school. So the point being, sometimes the price is what you pay, and sometimes the price is flexible. Please do not do something that we did for my first search. It's just I presumed that in-state costs were going to be the exact cheapest, and we were going to stay in the state of Illinois. But there are opportunities when you're looking at smaller schools, sometimes private schools, that aren't so selective like Northwestern, that you can really get impactful merit. So that's one of my takeaways for you guys. Don't automatically assume out of state means more expensive, because it doesn't. Then at the bottom, those asterisks is really all about the fact that is the in-state price that we pay for our flagship schools. I work with a lot of kids in the Wisconsin area. Really, we work nationwide. But University of Illinois these days, it has a difference in tuition. LAS being a little bit more like 34,000, and engineering and business, they have an additive, like an airline seat with a little bit more space, right? But except it's college for a different major. So sometimes colleges will just cost more depending on the major. So one of the things that families do need help with as they are searching for schools is really figuring out how to pay for them. So I want to lean into some of the different buckets of money. And the first bucket of money that we're going to talk about is financial assistance. So the reason why a family gets financial assistance, you've got two different buckets. One is merit-based. You get that money for grades and things that you have done. But the first bucket of money that we're going to talk about is really more in terms of what have we made, and is that going to be a circumstance that gets us a little bit of financial assistance from the government or from the colleges? And there are three different types of financial assistance that we hear about. Now, need-based, as I said, is that first bucket. It comes in grants and scholarships that you don't have to pay back. Merit-based scholarships are things that you are getting from the community, sometimes an employer, or from the colleges themselves, right? Those are also things that you don't have to pay back. Now, loans, that's the third part of this equation of ways to figure out how to pay for college and ways that help pay for college, and that would be loans. Loans are definitely something that you have to pay back, and we'll talk about all three of these things. So in order to see if you are going to get need-based assistance through your salaries, right, and what you are potentially making, you have to fill out one and maybe a second form. And we're going to talk about those today. But the one we're going to lean in on is the FAFSA because it is really, really, really more common. The CSS profile is a more complicated form, typically upwards of 200 questions, but it is used by far, far fewer colleges. They are typically the Ivy Leagues and highly selective colleges like U Chicago, Northwestern, Duke, Stanford, those kind of schools. So we're going to lean into the FAFSA. If you have CSS profile questions, I am happy to answer any of those, but we're going to wait until the end and cover the other ones because the FAFSA, there's the big changes about the FAFSA that we're going to feature today. Now, Mary, do we have any questions or are all those things in the chat from earlier?
So far, I don't see any questions. Those are guesses from the earlier quiz. But again, like Heidi mentioned, along the way, if you guys have any questions, I'm keeping an eye on it. So for clarifying or anything like that, feel free to utilize that chat.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much for clearing that up for me because I saw that little number. So again, two need-based forms, right? The FAFSA is the one that we're going to talk a little bit more. Either one of them give a calculation and a number that is used to determine, are you going to get any need-based assistance, right? This comes essentially from the last completed taxes and some of our assets. You're going to put all that information into the FAFSA and then it comes out with a number. The federal government uses this, as does the colleges. So a little bit more of a drill down on what the FAFSA is and what it isn't. The FAFSA typically opens up October 1st of the senior year in high school. That would be the first time that you would open it. It is actually the application for the student loan. So in order to get the loan with the best terms, you fill out this form, which is the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA. The FAFSA is used with the output that you will get from it, it is used by the federal government to determine if you are going to get federal need. But the colleges use this form as well. It is actually going to unlock for many, many schools additional merit money that they're going to use the form to determine what kind of other assistance that the colleges will give you. And this is how this happens. And it is a stressful form. It is a government form. It reads like a government form. And so understand it will require a little bit more patience this year because it's also going to be delayed. And that's why we're going to talk so much about it today. So again, the typical time frame in a FAFSA, the first time you would open it up was senior year in high school. This year it is delayed because it is a brand new form. This form is being revamped. The questions are going to go from a typical previous 108 questions. As of this year, they're going to go down to between 36 and 46, depending on how you answer. So hugely more simple in terms of just the amount of questions, right? A little bit more about this form. It is delayed, so don't worry, you are not missing anything yet. Do not fill this form out until the actual version comes out, because it is potential that what you're really doing is filling out last year's form. It completely just isn't out and isn't ready yet. The Department of Education has not given us an exact date. But we do think that it'll be out further to the end of December. We haven't heard anything, which is good news, that it's going to be further delayed, right? So we don't hear that it's going to be into January so far. So plan on sometime the last week of December. So how do you get ready to do this form, right? So it's really important for you to fill out and get, first, you're going to do a FAFSA ID. The student is going to have their own FAFSA ID. So they're going to need an entry point into this form, but there's another entry point into this form because there are so many financials that need to be pulled from your taxes. So the parents and or parent will have their own FAFSA ID, and that's the entry point into the form. Kids should not do this form on their own. Please help them. That is why 25% of these forms previously had errors in them. And the biggest error that was happening was the kids and the parents are over-reporting their assets, right? They're also transposing numbers. So please understand, a little bit of help on this form is so very critical. You're going to be pulling the data from your taxes. So that's part of what is going to make this form a little bit easier. It is required that you have the taxes completed from 2022 to fill out this year's FAFSA, which is considered 2024 FAFSA, because that is for the graduation year, right? Do we have any questions about the FAFSA and the process of the FAFSA, Mary, that have been inputted yet? Do you guys have any FAFSA questions at all? I'm going to talk about the changes next, but do you have any procedural questions about when you do it, what you need, anything? Please take the time to ask if you have those right now.
I'm not seeing any, but maybe to kickstart, are you going to go into documents and the things you need for the FAFSA? Can you give us information on that? Am I jumping the gun?
Perfect. I love it because there are certain things that we need to fill this out. So the FAFSA is a snapshot of your assets, but it is your taxes from the last completed year. So the bulk of what you are going to need is, if you have a bank account or a checking account, you're going to need that information because your assets are on the snapshot of the day that you are submitting. You will need some information about how to retrieve the data from your last completed tax year. So those are the big things that you would need to fill out the FAFSA. The FAFSA does not include qualified retirement accounts, however. So please do not over-report what is on the FAFSA. You are not going to be reporting your 401ks. You do not include your IRAs. And you do not include the the value of your primary home. That is not listed on the FAFSA. If you have a bank account or a checking account, that is on there. So that's what you would need for the snapshot.
Excellent. Thank you for clearing that up. We do have a question. Does FAFSA only apply to undergraduates, or is it completed for graduate school as well?
Good question. Yes, good process would be every year you would fill out the FAFSA, even in grad school. Reason being is that, yes, some colleges need this form to give out their layer of merit and or need. But also the reason why we're doing it is because it gives access to this federal student loan that is called the direct loan. And even in grad school, filling out the FAFSA, that would be the loan that gives you the best terms, way better than the private space. It's just a more strategic loan that has, it's just more straightforward. It doesn't have terms that switch middle term. It doesn't have balloon rates. What you get for the FAFSA rate is what you get. This should always be considered the first level loan that you would fill out. So it's good for grad school. The process would be every single year that you are going to attend college or post-secondary, that you would start to fill that out October 1st.
Excellent. Thank you. And if you have any follow-up questions on that, let us know and I will let you know. I have another question. For
Yeah,
FAFSA, how long would it take to get a response,
good question.
would you say?
Good question. It's typically going to be 3 to 5 days. If it takes more than 2 weeks, I would call and see if there was an input error or why the delay. I would say there might be some patience required this year because it's going to be a brand new form. Also, I expected this to come in the mail to me. It doesn't. Your student owns this form, so it will come to the email that you put down for them,
Oh, okay. Good to know.
right? I'm telling you, that is not the first place that I looked when I was looking for the FAFSA. I'm like, where's that FAFSA coming? It comes to your student's email address because they are the owners of the FAFSA.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know.
Yep.
Um, okay, so you mentioned additional merit, things like that. Why why would I fill out the FAFSA if I didn't think I would receive need-based benefit?
This is a good question. First of all, the state of Illinois, as I said, I do get to talk nationwide about this. So not everybody has this benefit, and I really say it's a benefit. Not everybody's required to do this for a high school graduation requirement, but we are. And it is because, so the reason that we're going to fill it out is, yes, many of us won't find ourselves need-based, but we're going to do it because many colleges won't give us merit unless we have filled out this form. And I don't know about you, but I didn't want to overpay for college. So anything that I was going to get, I wanted to fill out the forms in order to see, am I going to get something from the colleges that receive my FAFSA? So it's good strategy. Also, it gives you a little bit of ownership for your child if your child needs a little bit of skin in the game. And this is the way for them to contribute and potentially take a loan, but it is not an uber expensive loan in terms of how expensive loans can be. Right now, it's 5.5%. The Parent Plus loan, on the other hand, is upwards of 8%. It's 8.05% right now. So even if you didn't want your student to own it, which is fine, different choices. But if I was a parent and I had a gap between what I have saved and what college costs, the best strategy is to take out this loan as a student loan because it just literally doesn't have the interest rates attached to it as the Parent Plus loan does. So it's a better loan. Those would be the reasons to
That
fill
is
it
all
out.
good to know. Thank
Yeah,
you.
right. You
Again,
kind of
if you have
barrier.
questions, yes, if you have questions, put them in the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that. Love the conversations about how you can more strategically think about this form, right? Lots of different parts and pieces of it. And the FAFSA is being changed. Why? First of all, it needed to be changed. It was so complicated. Monster changes happened as a result of federal legislation that passed 3 years ago. These changes have been in the works for 3 years, right? So I've been talking about this to the Downers Grove Library and other libraries in our area to just really educate you about what is changing. There are 157 pages of changes, but there's no time for 157. So we're going to highlight really the biggest ones that matter most often for families. Some of the terms on this form are going to be changing. We are very used to hearing EFC, expected family contribution. That is being updated to something equally as confusing as student aid index. What you need to know is the result of the FAFSA is a number. That number is part of the federal formula and the collegiate level to determine need-based assistance and merit-based assistance. And this year it is SAI or Student Aid Index. 4 really big changes within the formula is that previously, if we had multiple kids in school at the same time, we got to share in the output of the FAFSA. So you would get a FAFSA output, and let's say that you had 2 kids at school, you would get a discount because you have 2 kids in school. This is the biggest thing that has been lost in the formula change as of this year. And when I say it's a pretty big change, it is because more than 60% of kids that are in college have a sibling. And so we got a discount for that. But as of this year, it will be lost. So if you have a senior that is applying to school, one of the things that we are recommending for our families that we work with is that colleges are aware that there's going to be a pretty big change overnight in the potential gifting that the families are receiving with need-based assistance. So we're recommending that families appeal the FAFSA a little bit more than usual. This is not necessarily a strategy that we always use, but because of the big shift overnight in this discount, we are definitely recommending that families do what we call a FAFSA appeal for the colleges that they get into, and see if there's any room for negotiation because you have multiple kids in school at the same time, and that has been removed in the course of just 1 year. For some families, this is going to be a huge change in how much support they are given from the federal government and from the schools. Another big change is for families that have divorce as part of their structure. There is a big change as far as the income that is required to be reported. It used to be that if a family were going to put the money for the FAFSA, the money or the income that was being used, or the parents' income, would be where the child lived the majority of time. And that would be the parents' information and income that was inputted on that FAFSA. If you had a 50-50 split, you could choose which income you used. People would choose the lesser income. As of this year, they are not giving us that loophole anymore. What they are requiring us to do, by definition, is who is providing more material support. And then it is going to be required that that parent is the parent whose information has to be used for FAFSA purposes. I'm always getting a lot of questions on that. So think about the family. Think about what income you thought you were going to be using. Going forward, it is going to be the parent who is providing more material support. That parent is required to put down their tax information for the purposes of FAFSA, meaning you cannot get the federal loan unless that parent utilizes that money and puts that income down. So if you've got the parent who is declaring the child as a dependent, it's going to be typically that parent and their income that is being used. The next big change in the FAFSA calculation that I think is super important for families to know about, if you have a small business, it used to be that 100 employees or less, you did not have to report the assets. They have left that off this year's form, which is very quizzical. We actually think this might be a mistake. So please stay tuned to some of these changes. We do a fabulous job of informing families through a family newsletter, which comes out once a month. We will talk about the changes that we see as a result of this FAFSA. Sign up for this newsletter. Mary has the information. It is actually in the chat. Feel free to go ahead and access some of that information. Sign up for the newsletter. Lots of great information. There's going to be Secure 2.0 acts for that launch next year with the Roth availability as of a 529 account. Some huge is coming down the pike from a financial standpoint. Opportunities there. We'll be talking about that in any of our family newsletter. So it's really great information for you guys to receive monthly about current college process. So if you have a family business, small business, it now is going to be required that you put down the assets, even if it's 100 employees or fewer. Now, the biggest change that we see that's a huge benefit, grandma and grandpa, and any gifting that is done outside the nuclear family does not get inputted into the FAFSA anymore. It used to be that gifts from outside mom and dad, so grandma and grandpa, an aunt or an uncle, could negatively impact the need that students were receiving. And that is because students had to declare this on the FAFSA as income on the next year's form. But the good news is, in the simplification, going from 108 questions down to between 36 and 46, that question has been removed. So the idea of having grandma and grandpa or an aunt or an uncle contribute provides far more positivity than it did last year. So the biggest recommendation that I can give to you is figure out, are you going to be need-based or not? How do you do that? Well, figure out how to get a FAFSA forecast and see if you're going to be need-based or not. And I am happy to do that for you, right? We can meet over Zoom and I can run some of the numbers and see if you're going to be need-based or not, and at which schools you might be need-based or not. And then we can make some recommendations based on the information, because the way the assets play out and who owns some of those assets make a difference in the FAFSA form and the formula. A child's assets, some of their bank accounts, are assessed higher, 4 times higher than a parent's. Parents' assets, if you consider a checking account, um, a investment property, um, a bank account, a checking account, a brokerage account, those are all assessed 529s at much, much lower than a student's assets. So where that money sits can make a difference depending on your FAFSA forecast and where you sit with that number. And I reviewed this a little bit earlier. What are the two biggest mistakes that we see? Well, first of all, the biggest mistake that we see when we work with families at College Inside Track, we worked with 250 kids, went through our program last year. Most families assume, hey, we're not going to get any of this need-based, so we're not even going to want to fill out this form. Understand that we really feel like that's bad strategy. There are opportunities to get money like from Dayton. Dayton is a wonderful school out in Ohio. If you fill out the FAFSA and go tour at Dayton, they give you a $4,000 scholarship per year just for filling out the form. And when a college gives out money like that, it's a 4-year gift. So please don't assume that you're not going to be need-based, because at many schools you will find, especially the ones that cost on the higher amount, like University of Denver, it really can be a case that you're going to get more money. Also, often families are wrapping themselves into a pretzel about their assets. Assets are not the major influencer of the FAFSA form. The major influencer of that FAFSA form is 100% parental income.
We have a question in the chat
Yeah,
talking about assets.
yes.
CV life insurance get added under assets in FAFSA.
No, anything cash value of a life insurance is not included. You do not put it on for the FAFSA. CDs, you do. Good question. Any other questions on that? Oh, I feel like I lost you, Mary.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I muted myself on accident, guys.
Okay, okay.
That's the only question right now, but if you have any follow-ups to that, just let us know.
Yeah. What to put on and on, not on the FAFSA can be super, super confusing. Basically anything that is a qualified retirement account, 401ks, IRAs, a SEP, and your primary home, and that cash value of a life insurance, don't put that on the FAFSA. And you're right, those are the biggest mistakes that we see. Now, if you are filling out the CSS profile for a school, those are fair game. Typically, you will have to include those for those more selective schools. That just will be required. Okay, continuing on. So when I meet with families, I think the biggest question that most families do ask is, where do we find scholarships, right? And while there is no magic rainbow of figuring this out, 100% colleges are the largest single provider of scholarships. The internet, not so much. So let's review from a return of investment, where are we going to find the best scholarship dollars? Because truly, this comes from building a right fit college list. As I said, the colleges are the biggest gifters of money. They typically unlock far more money than a local scholarship from a bank or Rotary. Those typically are just smaller amounts. So by building a right fit college list. Who are we applying to? Are we looking for merit to help with paying for college? If the answer is yes, and again, I don't know anybody who wants to overpay for school. So the idea of merit it resonates with all of us, right? And I want you to understand there are just certain schools that don't need to give merit money, and that's because they have a line out the door applying to them, right? So the idea is search for schools that give out scholarships in the first place. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Colleges will give you money when you apply because they accept your student and you get a financial award. And it says something like, congrats, you're going to be a bear, a buck, a duck, or a beaver, or some other woodland creature, right? So you've been accepted. You get that financial award. But the other way that you're getting money from the colleges themselves is that in that application or in that acceptance is a link to financial aid at the college that you've just been accepted to. There are departmental scholarships that you have a far better chance of winning than just Google searching it. Why? Because you just have fewer applicants, fewer people being accepted. And so it's not like a huge national pool applying, right? So those are called departmental scholarships that you can apply to while in your acceptance letter that you get. And typically the acceptance letter, also understand, it comes in the US mail, but the first time you see it is usually in your student's portal, right? Kids miss this. Why? Some kids aren't even checking email every day, right? That would have been my child. At 17, it just wasn't in either of my boys' daily activities to check their email every day. I strongly suggest you having your kids work on their email processes. Snapchat, they do that every day, multiple times a day, right? So have them start checking their email a little bit often. Now, local scholarships, those are great. But from a return on investment, you will not get as much from a local scholarship as you will from the college itself. Where do we look for local scholarships? Any school in the western suburbs, you have like a high school guidance counselor. They typically will have a local list of scholarships that your child can look at, consider, and apply for. I know we did it at Glenbard West. Where we suggest you spending very, very little time is Google searching on the internet. On average, you have to apply to between 50 and 80 to get an average award of $500. So truly, these kids are better off adding another lawn to whatever they're doing in the summer or working another shift at the pool, right? Google searching scholarships just causes a ton of grief and angst within family members because you often have to do a pretty big application and then an essay. And if you're having to do 50 of those, do the math, it just doesn't work out with the numbers. So what are we looking for? Here's my suggestion of how you find scholarships based on the schools that your child could be applying to. Because colleges give out money for reasons that are important to them, but not all colleges need to. So you're looking at schools that have a selectivity rate of greater than about 25%, right? So does the college need to give out merit? Like Northwestern. Okay, Northwestern's selectivity rate, their admissions rate from last year, if you go onto their website, is definitely below 25%. Matter of fact, it's below 10%. So right off the bat, you know that whatever merit they're giving, it's really, really super small or not existent, right? It's like buying the latest iPhone. You don't need Apple doesn't need to discount that because there's so many people wanting to pay full price for that, right? Same thing with college. If their selectivity rate is really, really, really highly selected, it is doubtful that there is going to be much merit. Certainly not a lot that moves the needle. So think of that again. It's 25% approximately. The selectivity rate is somewhere around there. If it's 50%, 60%, you're more likely to get merit money at those schools. And then what does your child have to have? Well, for that school, you look on their websites. Are their grades in the top 25 or above percent? Are the test scores, those ACTs, SATs, are they in the top 25% and above, right? That would be reasons that you could clue into, hey, my child might get merit at this school if the school gives out merit. Also, your extracurriculars. Sometimes they need people in the band, right? But maybe they have enough violinists. Maybe they need somebody who plays the tuba, right? So the more unique your child is with some of their extracurriculars, the more likely fewer and fewer people have that skill. And so that would be another way that you would assess it. Demographically interesting, this is fascinating, but for sure, something like your geography, where you live, something about you that's demographically interesting. My son goes to Indiana University. I read their statistics on the class from last year. They have students from every single state within the United States, plus 23 countries, right? So the fact that we have a child who wants to go to school, maybe in New Mexico, maybe New Mexico needs more kids, or Alabama needs more kids from Illinois. That would be one way that you would be demographically or geographically interested. So this is a college that we have kids go to, that when we work with a college inside track. And here is a recipe card for reasons that schools give out money. Demonstrated interest. What does that mean? That means that you have taken the time to interact with the college in a way that's meaningful to them. And not all colleges track demonstrated interest, but for those that do, it can be pretty impactful. So are you visiting? Are you taking an online tour? Did you stop by at a college fair when there was a representative from the college? That is demonstrated interest. And many, many colleges, through data analytics, track this, right? And for this school, it does, they would be giving out a $3,000 award for demonstrated interest. And you're multiplying that gift times 4, because this is just for the first year. Most scholarships from a college are given out in multi-year form. Living out of state, okay? This can be way more impactful than we truly understand. There are border state scholarships that can be huge, multi-year scholarships for our kids. So living out of state can be a big deal. A's on the transcript definitely still matter. This school actually has an amount per the A. If you have taken a rigorous class, like an AP class, they list it and they will give you $400 for each one that you have taken. An excellent letter of recommendation to accompany the application earns $1,800 at this school. Increased ACT, definitely still a factor for many, even in the test optional landscape. Increase it, like if you look at Missouri University, you can even see with a larger ACT at Auburn with a larger ACT or an SAT, the difference between a 24 and a 25 or a 27 and a 28 or a 30 and a 31, at Auburn alone, the difference between a 30 and a 31, you go from $8,000 per year to $15,000 per year for 1 point in the ACT. So for many, many schools, even in test optional, actually Auburn is test preferred, and they say that, you can get a better merit scholarship because of it. This school is not just a FAFSA school, but it is a CSS profile school as well. And it shows up in the merit scholarship that you did both. And then in the test optional landscape, it is a part of a powerful narrative about who your child is, what kind of student they are, that they talk about themselves through the written word. A beautifully written essay can garner significant money. And for this school, it ranged between $1,000 and $8,500 for the students, right? We worked with about 250 students last year. So a bunch of tips here. And I know we have about 9 minutes, so I want to make sure that I spend enough time. Understand the test optional landscape is definitely in flux right now. But there are some key indicators that we see coming out of our class from last year, and I want to explain them to you. Colleges do not care if you take the SAT or the ACT. It used to be that there was a preference depending on your region. So just figure out which one with a practice test. Mary, I would afterwards, let's make sure if you guys do a practice test. I think you do. Typically offer a practice test. Sometime it's in February. Take that, see which one suits your child, and then study for the one that suits them best. Big changes in the SAT. This could be great for your student. It's going digital. It's going adaptive, which means it is going to be significantly shorter. I mean, by like an hour, right? So the idea behind what can that look like for my student who doesn't want to take a 3-hour test will be really positive. I think both of my boys would have appreciated a 2-hour test rather than a 3-hour test, which is what typically it's been. So figure that out. If you are a senior in high school, this has no impact for you. But if you are a junior or a sophomore or a freshman, the idea that you have choices now really can be impactful for you. And understand that some prep, we really do see this playing out for many, many kids. They just become a better strategic test taker through a little bit of prep, right? Online prep looks, there's books at the Downers Grove Library that you can check out for free. Often the libraries also have Khan Academy, Princeton Review, or Magoosh, which can also be free access to testing and help there. We also recommend that kids do not take this test 10 times. Typically, you get best results after 2, maybe 3, right? You don't need to keep on taking this 10 times just to get your goal score. But there are a lot of changes within this landscape. Because of test optional landscape, applications we have seen since 2020 increase at many, many schools, upwards of 20%. Any of the kind of Ivy League or Tier 1, it's actually upwards of like 25%. So understand that competitive admissions is just getting more and more challenging, even in public flagship schools like Tennessee. They just announced as of this summer, because of all the applications that they are getting flooded with from out of state, that they are going to go back and admit their in-state kids with a priority first. Texas is doing this, North Carolina is doing this, Georgia is doing this. So understand that there are a lot of things in flux as a result of test optional landscape. So the trends that we see from the classes that we have had recently work with College Inside Track is that test optional can be an opportunity for your child to apply to schools and see, does the test reflect their GPA or potentially not? And this is a case by case situation for families, right? Do a couple of tests, see if that reflects the grades. And if it doesn't, you can consider, how do we go test optional and what does that look like? Also understand that many colleges are preferring you go early decision, right? Because it makes their job so much easier, right? Notre Dame specifically is one of the schools that does early decision, right? So many colleges are preferring that you do that. You only have one early decision card though, so choose carefully. And some of the complexities that are going into the test optional landscape just get more and more challenging. So tip number 3 here, understand that college with costs that they are right now are a business decision. So what kind of a learner do you have? And think of it as, how am I going to pick a college that is going to help my student grow and then thrive and have job options afterwards, right? What kind of a learner are they? You don't want to be taught by a TA, teacher's assistant? Maybe consider a smaller school or applying to an honors college within the school. U of I, they have an honors college. Indiana, they have an honors college. That's a way to make a big school smaller. And then there is the idea of developing a 4-year plan to pay for school. Have this conversation earlier and earlier with your student. The worst thing that we see is we are just going to apply to schools and figure out if we can pay for them after we get in. I can't tell you how heartbreaking this is when parents see how expensive the school is and then their child has fallen in love with that school, to have to tell them, hey, I'm so sorry. Excuse me, but we are not ready to pay for that kind of cost. So understand ahead of time the potential to figure out what schools cost and plan that out in a 4-year. What have we saved? Take that savings and place it equally over 4 years and see, what do we have per year? And then what are we comfortable with the gap? And those are the foundational ways to create a 4-year plan to pay for school. Another things that we see families do is, hey, we're going to pay for the first year, maybe 2, and then we'll figure that out from there. Please don't do that. I just met with a family that is having that happen. Their kid is in Arizona, and they frankly don't have the money for year 2 and year 4, or year 3 and year 4. So their kid is going to have to, unfortunately, come home after the sophomore year. And this just upsets the whole scenario. They have found friends, they typically like the school, and now they have to come home, right? So instead, what do we have saved? Spread that over 4 years. Then figure out, what are we comfortable with the stretch and covering between what the college costs and what we have saved. And that is a much better way to plan for the 4 years. And define expectations. It is okay to have to take those student loans, but having those conversations earlier in the process is so very important. So as I said before, it is becoming more and more challenging, and we're going to wind down here, for kids to choose right fit schools. And I think one way that we can talk about that is to think about the transfer rate. Because when we think about how many kids are transferring schools, we can see that they are not doing a very good job. National transfer rate is 38%. The reason why that matters is because it costs us so much money if they do transfer. $14,000 on average for one transfer. So that is why it is so important. It really is the most expensive purchase that we are going to make other than our home. So treat it like a business decision, right? And at College Inside Track, we help with what is the second biggest choice and decision financially that you will make other than your home. And when we help in three key ways. We help navigate the entire process of right academic, right financial, and right social fit schools. When we work with family, that national transfer rate goes down to 4%. Right fit first is always the goal. We ensure that you get best pricing for any schools that are on your list, and we do get to be a neutral third party helping through the process. So I cover so much. I know that this is a lot of information. I want you to know there is a great way to meet with me and answer questions and ask questions, and I will give you answers. Um, Reach out to Mary, fill that Google form out. Take me up on the offer. It's a free family consultation. I can do a FAFSA calculation. Then we can figure out, are you going to be need-based or not? Best time to take advantage of that is sophomore or junior years, right? If your student is on and it's too early, fill it out. We'll reach out later. Freshman year is typically a little bit early to talk about college. Also, ways to follow us and get information is on our Facebook and that family newsletter, right? And you are going through this process. You know, families are going through this process. Share this opportunity to review the recording. Mary and Downers Grove Library is doing a great recording. So right now I'm going to take opportunity to answer some questions here at the end. I know that we're a little bit short on time.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Heidi.
Yeah.
We did get a question, and I think you might have answered it, but if you have any follow-up questions, do you offer your services as an independent consultant, or do you represent College Inside Track?
Oh, that is a good question. I'm actually, I'm not a consultant. I am part of the education team. We have 12 full-time consultants. So I meet with the family the first time to kind of answer any of your questions. But you know, worked here a long time. I have a ton of knowledge. I'm happy to do that and meet with you for it free the first time.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned earlier taking the test. Just so you guys know, we do have a few empty spots in our upcoming ACT practice test that takes place this coming Saturday. I know it's short notice, it's a few days away, but if anyone is interested in taking that practice test, we do have a few more spots.
That's so
Heidi did
good.
put the Google form in, she kind of bumped it in the chat. Again, that is a great place to get some information from her, as well as, you know, this recording. Feel free to reach out to the library, to any of us, and we can put you in contact as well. Does anyone have anything that they want to follow up on or anything like that?
Yeah, I went through the SAT and ACT kind of quickly. If you guys have questions on the new SAT, I'm happy to answer those. Reach out to Mary or you know, we can talk about which test and why, how many times you would take it. Can you super score still? Um, you know, my child isn't a great test taker. What do we do? Those kind of questions, I'm happy to kind of answer those. The new SAT is coming out March of next year. So that would be the first time kiddos would have the opportunity to take those. And really lean into the library on some of these free resources. They do such a good job. Um, it's okay if they haven't studied yet for the practice test this weekend, right? Have them take it cold. And then they just have like a beginning score to launch from. Um, it's a great local resource to do that.
I'm biased, but I do agree. And also, you know, sometimes it helps just to get practice taking a test like that. even if you're looking for just some, to get more comfortable in the
Yeah,
environment of taking a test, we're always here. Well, thank you so much,
yeah,
Heidi. I appreciated everything you told us. I'm sure everyone here, everyone who's able to watch the recording will appreciate it. We have some thank yous to you in the chat. And again, thank you from this library. We really appreciate you. You are an incredible resource as well. So thank you so, so
yeah.
much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming on to the webinar. I'm happy to do it in person at one point too. So, thanks everybody for being on. Mary, thank you for helping moderate with me tonight. I
Oh,
really appreciate it.
absolutely.
You did an
Absolutely.
awesome
Thank
job.
you all so, so much. Have a great night and best of luck as everyone goes through their senior year or their next few years before college. Good luck to everyone.
Yep, yep. Exciting time. Take care, everybody.